Hi, I'm Laynie Browne, and I'm so happy to be here today to talk about a poem, Yellow Orange by Bernadette, and I'm joined happily by Max Warsh. Hello, Max.
Hi.
And Phil Good.
Hello.
And Marie Warsh.
Hi.
To see you. And Leanne Browne.
Hello.
Julia Block. Happy to see you. Brenda Coultas, thank you for being here. And Julie Levitan.
Hi.
And Emily Rush.
Hi.
Wow. I'm so happy. What an amazing group we have here today. So, Yellow Orange, I wanted to start with the title. And I wanted to ask Emily first because Emily thought a lot about color in relation to Bernadette's writing. So, say anything you want about color in the title.
So what I did basically was copy and paste every single letter in like 10 of her poems to correspond with the colors she saw them in as a synesthete. And as I was listening to her read it, I was trying to visualize it in like a yellow-orange aura. And I was very successful with that. I don't know if anyone else can do that in their head, but I recommend it. It's really cool as you listen.
Fantastic. So, what does it mean to have synesthesia as a poet, or in Bernadette's case? Julie, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I certainly cannot really imagine what it was like, but I did talk to Bernadette about it a bit. Emily and I both did. I think it's interesting that in some cases there are like letters that correspond with specific colors, but also entire words will have, she described having kind of this aura of yellow-orange. And that the words selected in here were interesting, but also interesting perhaps because they were yellow-orange. And I think another thing that it always comes to mind when I think about Bernadette and her synesthesia is talking with her about the experience of discovering that about herself, and that we recognize it as something that's like so kind of cool and powerful and has created all this rich work, but that was a difficult thing to be figuring out about yourself as a young poet, which I believe she was when this was written. And so that the work provides some space for that, maybe.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So let's dive into the first stanza. And I'm immediately struck because we've made a few different recordings today. Just the range of the different kinds of poems that Bernadette Mayer wrote. So my jig was a sage ear. The mirror focuses on warm fog. Wise marrow, ram, queer fig, curious razor, smear in a coffee mist. The war was a sick sore for merry rims. Okay, Brenda, anything you want. What's going on?
Well, I was mentioned to Julie, I feel like I've been reading Jabberwocky. But I love the jarring because my brain wants to go make sense of things, and then but it can't, which is very delightful. And it just, just like, wow. Makes your senses kind of pop.
Okay, mine wants to make sense and can't, and that is a delight. Just want to pause there for a moment, because I think that's really important in this poem in particular, and in a lot of poems that we love, right? Julia.
Yeah, there's delight in not being able to make sense, and I couldn't find sexic in a dictionary anywhere, and in the recording it sounds like she almost says sexist, and then she corrects and goes back to sexic, which is what we see on the page. And there are a couple words that I can read inside that word, even if the word itself doesn't appear in any of the dictionaries that I looked at. And there's pleasure in that too, and made-up words and neologisms that imply other words inside them, and the alliteration of sexic, sore, makes me start thinking of all sorts of homonyms for sore also.
What are some of the words you hear in the potentially invented word?
I hear sex, I hear septic, I hear toxic. For sore, S-O-A-R, on the page, I hear a different kind of sore, S-O-R-E, like, tenderness or pain or other kinds of sensation, and it makes me think about how, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, when Bernadette was at the writer's house talking about synesthesia, she also talked about the pleasure that you can experience when you have that relationship to words, and so I'm just really feeling that with all of these sounds, like just letting the sounds make their own meaning without the lexical meaning is a huge part of the pleasure of these words.
Fantastic. Thank you. Leanne, let's look at as far as I come, the sow and the ram wager wish arrows. Just rip, go anywhere.
Okay, well, it's weird because I was sort of fixating on all the X's and Z's in this poem, and there's none in that
Okay, so
stanza. So I don't know what I
We
need
can
to
go
do.
back to the X's and Z's.
Or there's sow,
I
or
ju-
so.
There's, what?
There's that S.
No, it's X's
X's,
or Z's.
yeah,
Like there's,
X's and
there's
Z's,
like,
right.
because yellow orange
Oh,
seems
you
very.
said that and I heard S.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, it's true that S is related to X. Yeah, it's sort of like sound-wise, but it's more harsh. Like X's and Z's, it's very whiz-bang, kind of like red, yellow, orange. It's very. I mean, it has a. It actually, the first time I read it, it almost sounded like Shakespearean to me. Kind of like kind of this really like somebody doing a really racy kind of monologue. It's very like explosive. But I don't know, like the worm and everything. But there's all these neologisms and the the sexic and then the coccyx in the next stanza. Various sim, is capital S. She was always fascinated with names and proper nouns. Sim, like is a SIM card, is a person named Sim, is a coccyx rage. So toxic and coccyx, like your tailbone that gets broken and it really hurts, that kind of thing. I don't know, it just has a lot of emotion and meaning and I mean feeling, like that yellow orange aura you're talking about. Yeah.
I also thought of coxswain,
Oh.
who steers the boat.
And Cox.
Cox.
And a cod piece. Coccyx.
Yeah,
Cox.
it's all there because we have, I mean, the erotics are always there, right? So we have sexic, as far as I come, could also be read sexually. And then we have the animals, the sheep and the pig, the sow and the sow and the ram. Although sow could be sow or sow, it could be read like planting. Sow and the ram wager. The sheep and pigs are the actors.
And arrows could be arrows.
Yeah,
Arrows and arrows.
arrows.
So you spoke a little bit about the next stanza, the sim. Various sim is a coccyx rage. My soul wax samurai swore on his swarm rock arrow. So Marie, anywhere from the beginning up until the arrow, just pick any word or line that interests you and tell us what comes to mind.
Yeah, I kind of like Swarm Rock. Swarm Rock Arrow.
What do you like about it?
I don't know. I mean, I kind of just keep thinking about what she said at the end of her reading, too, of just like being obsessed with these words and writing them down. And there's just like all these words everywhere. And she was always kind of like collecting them and thinking words were funny and playing the jumble and like, misspelling things on purpose. And like, yeah, just all of this being all of her word play and word fascination. And often I think the sexy words or the sex words kind of coming in and giving it a certain type of feeling or edge. And then I was also thinking about playing Mad Libs with my nieces and how they always really like to put in like stinky and like, like words that are like, make everything kind of like change the whole like tenor of the sentence because it's like has these associations, and some of these words I feel like do that too.
I love getting the granddaughters in the recording. In fact, I was hoping they could come and actually speak, but they're very busy in their schedules. But I don't know if Max wants to say anything about, have your daughters inherited this proclivity for language?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all I hadn't kind of thought about it in relation to
this poem, I guess. But no, I mean, there's a lot. No, I mean, I think there's like this, maybe erotic nature of like just the sort of love of the sounds, maybe, and it's sort of this playing with the sort of that kind of eroticism, maybe, of just like willing to just let the poem kind of, I think, be playful and loving in the sounds that it's making. And I don't know, I mean, there's clearly an I and a his, and I mean, there's players involved in this sort of erotic situation, but I think it's more, I think it's really this love of the kind of synesthetic experience she's having with these words, whether it's the sort of aura or the sort of sounds that they're making. I keep going back to curious razor smear in a coffee mist.
Yeah.
Just the visual sort of sensory kind of sensorial elements of that line really just keep landing there.
That's a great one. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a sound piece, but it's also a visual piece. And then there's play, and also the way it looks on the page. We haven't talked about that. Phil, what do you want to talk about in this poem?
Well, you talked about the color, so obviously I guess X has to be part of the yellow-orange in a big way. So that's where you get all the exotic words. Yeah, the twisty thought, like where were these twisty thoughts coming from? I'm kind of wondering what Bernadette was reading at the time as well. Was this sort of Gertrude Stein reading? Was she already corresponding with like Clark Coolidge and his strange language and, rhythms on words colliding? I really don't know.
Do we know what year this poem is from?
This is early, right?
Definitely early.
I don't know poetry and early poems, but
Do not know.
But no, I definitely thought of
I want to say
Stein.
it's like early.
Yeah.
Stein, right?
I thought of Stein when I first read this. The Tender Buttons, it seems like it's influenced by that kind of
But then again,
really dense language, but it's different.
she was writing, or she was writing like Stein supposedly before she ever read Stein,
Right.
Yeah.
right? So,
And that's all the language poets went to claim her
yeah, right.
and like say that she started it. And she's like, nah.
So, yeah.
Like she did
So
everything.
is this a language poem?
They would say. Yeah, I mean proto. But it's also, like you said, a sound poem and a synesthetic poem and a shape poem and
And an
a
erotic
wordplay poem and a million kind
And a
of
visual piece.
But that first line, the word ear, reminds me of that early poem of her corn, like an ear of corn.
Yeah.
Like there's a little reverb with that,
And that's yellow.
and that's like a found poem. It feels like a dictionary poem. That
Corn
one.
is a small, hard seed. Yeah.
Amazing.
And sage ear, that looked like a little piece of sage, like looks like an ear.
Or it could be like the ear of a wise person, a sage.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, both.
Or the ear itself is wise.
And jig could be a dance or a jigsaw, a puzzle, and the jig is up. The
Or a
gig is-
trick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I love so much about this piece is almost all the vocabulary has multiple meanings. And so, depending on how much time you spend with each word, then more layers are revealed. Thinking about it. Let's look at the middle. Various sim is a coxic rage. Now that's a line I spent a long time trying to think about the ways we can read the word sim. So any thoughts on that? Sim. Sim with a capital S. So one would be to simulate.
Simian, like a monkey, a intelligent being.
Simian. Various sim is a coxic rage. We're stumped, Bernadette.
She's
I like-
laughing.
I like
Yeah,
the
right.
sound of various saying.
Sim.
It's a hissing
Right.
sound in that line.
There's simples, and there may be an acronym as well.
Well, you've got all those S's in that stanza. Sim, soul,
Samurai.
samurai, swarm,
Samurai.
swore, swarm.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
I did count up 7 X's in this poem.
In the poem.
7 X's. That's a lot of X's.
It's a lot.
That's got to be on purpose.
Good color.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely.
What about my soul? That's so different than my various sim and a
It's
toxic rage.
yeah, it's very different. I think the line breaks are really important there because rage, my soul, or my soul wax, as in like a soul waxes, but then it's a wax samurai, which is more funny than sentimental, like a, waxing soul.
Also, it kind of sounds like wax, like whack.
Oh, right, like whack-a-mole.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah,
Or wax poetic or whatever.
Yeah.
right.
True.
Kind of making fun of waxing poetic.
But what's a samurai? That's not a
Oh,
samurai.
it's not
Yeah,
a song.
samurai, yeah.
That's another neologism. It's like, not, I don't think it's.
So we're meant to hear multiple words in the word swore on his swarm rock arrow. We're just inside the sound. Let's each say one more thing, whatever we want. I'm really curious about the says the worm, but we can go anywhere that we want. So, Emily, anything you want to say?
I wrote down endure a bubble around. I think Leanne said it. Whiz bang.
Yeah, that's all. This is a big whiz bang poem. I'll just say the game in a jock axe searing just cracks me up every time. Like I'm just like, are we talking about jock itch? Like what are we getting into here? But it just seems like that entire line is meant to evoke like just making you laugh hysterically without really knowing why. And I love that.
Fantastic, Brenda.
I'm wondering if the worm is the worm in a bottle at the bottom of a bottle of tequila, or is it the worm turns, or it's like, what the worm is a really interesting word to use there. That's speaking. The worm is speaking, right?
Yes, well, that's how I read it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Julia.
Ask ears frame. So that stanza feels like it begins with these commands, like come with a quick wag of veer, carry sex, ask ears frame. And then I love this idea that, or I'm thinking about this idea that it's not just about like ask your ear to get these sounds, to get these meanings, but it's the ears frame too. It's just like pushing it just a little farther. I'm trying to wrap my mind around the idea of an ear's frame. Like the ear itself is a frame for sound, but does it? It's like, a lot of things.
Yeah, I'm gonna go those last two lines. Says the worm in cocks in jam.
In
so
jam.
like back to Brenda's thing about the worm and the tequila. At least like it's in jam. It's jam. Like if you like preserved, like in alcohol, but it's also enjambment.
Right.
But then there's no
Yeah.
enjambment after that line. Usually there's another line, but then that's the end of the poem. So so like somehow that's funny too.
Yes, it's funny.
A worm is in jam.
Yes. The
Yeah, I
word is-
love it.
The word is curling and where's it go?
Yeah.
What
Marie?
an ending.
Yeah, I think it's fun, like, the more you just kind of stare at the page, too, you just start to see, like, a lot of weird things. I mean, now I'm also seeing, like, in addition to the X being repeated, I'm seeing a lot of RM, like rims, ram, marrow, warm, like, this kind of RM combo, and then, like, war. Like just the R made me feel arrows, like this feeling of samurai, like the R feeling as well.
Thank you, Phil.
Yeah, I was imagining, looking at the page, the pleasure she took in seeing the color, but also I'm thinking, and I don't have the answer, but she probably took great pleasure in the actual shape. And there's probably a reason why it's shaped this way. It is a very unusual shape. If you look at the way everything's broken and indented. That was my only thought.
That's a good one. Max?
Yeah, I guess just, when you were saying that about the shape of the poem, I was, as you were saying that, thinking about the just recurrence of the word ear, which happens at the beginning, and then it happens again, ask ears frame, and just then going back to how much the sound of these words is so important, and even what she just said in the recording of like just gathering words that sound interesting or are interesting to her, and like putting them all together onto the page. And it's really like the ear is sort of creating the poem in a way. That, I don't know.
The
For
shape
me.
of the poem looks like an ear too.
Yeah, that's what I was
Little
just
bit.
saying.
Oh
That's
yeah,
what he
you
was saying.
said
It
that.
kind of
Okay.
the shape of it
Yeah.
started to feel ear-like, and I don't know, just like
Yeah.
it's very much about the ear is sort of the protagonist or something in this way. Or,
That's a
I
good
don't know.
sentence.
Yeah.
Wow, amazing. Well, my final thought is that in this moment, I'm wondering if the worm is authored the poem, or if a worm wrote a poem, might it look like this?
Well, and then is it an
On-
earworm?
An earworm. And also just echoing what Max said about what she said in the recording about being obsessed with words and how that is so contagious, happily, for all of us. So, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.